Capcom is a company you think of when you think of great games. This company has been the brilliant minds behind the Ace Attorney games, Resident Evil, Street Fighter, and Mega Man, and a lot more. Normally you wouldn't have to worry about the games Capcom releases, and normally that is the case, except with Dragon's Dogma 2. This game is an absolute nightmare. Everybody seems to ignore all of the problems with this game, and I can't seem to understand why. The game has so many glaring issues that make it so hard to sit down and play, and please be aware that I really don't hate this game because it does have its moments. I just don't like a lot of the decisions the developers made when they were creating this game. A lot of gameplay designs will leave you scratching your head wondering, why did they do this? What were they thinking? My honest opinion is this game was Capcom's way of testing out new engines and map designs. The reason why I say this is because a lot of Dragon Dogma 2's map design is supposedly what influenced the developers into making Resident Evil 9 open world. We don't know this is the case for sure, but based on what we've heard about Resident Evil 9 in the leaks, this is probably going to be the case. Also, this game was created using the new RE engine that Capcom showed off at all of the showcases they did for this game. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of this game. First of all, Dragon Dogma 2 is a sequel to the game that was made 12 years ago, and it is an open-world RPG. The second game is literally the exact same story as the first game. Honestly, this story is completely confusing and is considered to be one of the worst RPG storylines. Capcom really shot themselves in the foot with this game, mainly because of how rushed the game feels. I'll get to the issues in a second, but I'm going to try to explain the story from at least what I understood from the story. Dragon's Dogma 2 takes place in the land of Vermund and Batal. In a parallel universe from the original game, you take on the role of the Arisen, who is a hero that must defeat the dragon who basically ripped out your heart and left you with a giant scar that glows whenever you are near or fighting a dragon. And that scar is supposed to mean you're going to rule the kingdom. But because of a conspiracy, a false Arisen has been given power to the throne. The player must uncover the conspiracy and expose the imposter. The story, like I said, is very weak and extremely confusing to a lot of people. Even though I have played a good portion of the game, I had to look up a summary to understand what the hell happened in the game. Basically, the Queen of the Realm was part of a conspiracy to kick you out of power and have her son rule as the Arisen. And even though they set this up to be the main story of the game, it ends up falling flat and the game just ends with a big dragon boss fight. I honestly believe the reason why they didn't add a solid fast travel system was to stop people from completing the game in under like 5 hours. Like I said before, this game basically has a very short story which people absolutely hated. It comes off as extremely lazy, and that's not even the worst part about this game. I'm going to explain to you what my gripes were with this game. So, for starters, the main issue I have is that you need fairy stones if you want to travel around the massive region. This makes it super difficult because if you're just trying to casually play for the story, it's almost impossible for you to do unless you want to put at least 20 hours into the game. Besides that, they have carts that you can ride in for fast travel, but Lord have mercy if you want to doze off to skip ahead to the next town. You'll be woken up and forced into combat against either powerful enemies or a huge group of enemies that will most likely kill you. With this game, you'll die a lot more than you'll kill anything, and we'll talk about the combat in a minute. The fairy stones are an alternative to using the carts because you can skip the combat and teleport directly to where you need to go. The only problem is the fairy stones cost a special kind of money that you can either find on the ground or you can get them through completing missions. And you can only really get roughly 1 to 2 at a time. If you don't have that, then you'll have to walk 15 minutes across the massive landscape to get to your destination. And that's not even including all the group of enemies you're going to run into. This game also gives you the option to buy fairy stones as a microtransaction, and the amount of microtransactions in this game is another thing we'll discuss because that itself is a massive problem with this game. The combat in this game is extremely messy, and it's way too easy to get overwhelmed by grab attacks. The 5 main enemies you'll fight in this game are wolves, harpies, vultures, goblins, and mercenaries, and all 5 of these enemies will gang up on you so quickly, and even though you might have just rested up at a nearby inn, you'll have to haul your ass all the way back to do it again, because the health system in this game is shit too, and that's another problem that kills your progression in this game. The enemies have the ability to do these debilitating grab attacks that can either pick you up and throw you, or drag your ass 2 blocks from the health of your teammates. The bigger boss enemies do the same thing, and again, makes it extremely hard for you to progress to new areas and go further in the story. In most cases, you'll get a quarter of the way to your destination and then get bum rushed by 2 groups of enemies and have to restart and respawn 10 minutes back from where you last saved. And God help you if you accidentally hit the respawn from the last inn checkpoint, because that'll knock your ass back at least an hour of playtime if you aren't resting at the inn consistently. The combat itself is also extremely clunky, and the block and attack buttons are really weird buttons. There's also a weird grab mechanic you can do to grab onto enemies like your Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy. You also get special attacks that use up stamina, and unless you have an item to regain your stamina or you have your pawns help you regain your stamina, it takes forever for your character to be able to regain it on your own. So the healing system in this game absolutely sucks because it's basically the same health bar as Dark Souls 2. I don't know if there are any Souls fans watching, but if you remember Dark Souls 2, you'll remember that when you die, your health bar shrinks down until you use a human effigy, and or rest at a bonfire to regain your health. The healing in this game works the same way, and god damn it is it annoying. In this game, your health bar will shrink until you rest at a bed. And if you're all the way out in scenic nowhere and you die a couple of times, you'll have to rush all the way back to an inn to regain that health. Again, if you add that with the combat and the debilitating enemy attacks, it makes for a lot of time you waste just trying to survive. That also ties in with the checkpoint system, where you get the option to rest from your last save or restart from the last inn you rested at, and it eats up a ton of your time and just makes the game more difficult than it needs to be. Now, this is one of the huge complaints when this game was released, because they put microtransactions in a single-player game. They literally pulled a page out of the Ubisoft playbook and make you pay for the most basic things that you need in the game. If you want a camping kit, it's $2.99. If you want a fairy stone, it's $2.99. If you want points to hire pawns to your group, it's 99 cents, $2.99, and $9.99. And if you want the whole kit and caboodle, it's $15.99. And they even sell the key to escape prison if you ever get arrested by the guards. They basically turned a AAA title into a Farmville mobile store. Many of the people have been complaining about Capcom's microtransactions policy in the last few years. We saw a huge rise in microtransactions in Resident Evil 4's remake, and at the time it wasn't that big of a deal because it wasn't items that you needed to complete the game. But with Dragon's Dogma 2, it's completely crazy how bad these microtransactions are. And if you're like me and you don't want to pay for the microtransactions because you don't want to pay for stuff that you need in the game, that you can get in the game, but I actually needed to buy some of this crap to help me out in a tight spot. And I believe that's extremely unfair to do to your players. It's basically saying, hey, you want to get out of this situation that you're stuck in? Well, if you give me $5, then you can get out of this situation. And it's such a scummy business tactic, and it just left a lot of players with a bad taste in their mouth. The quest markers are also a huge issue because they are extremely confusing and hard to find in some locations. With one of the missions, you have to help out a village with a massive lizard monster problem. The quest marker says that the location you need to go to is out in the middle of the ocean. It took me about 7 minutes to figure out that it was talking about an underground tunnel. That's not even the only issue with the quest markers, because all of the quest markers are like this. Some of the quest markers show up on the map with no explanation as to where to go, and it really threw me off because the game, again, is so much harder than it needs to be. Now, you can tell that the game was rushed through development because of how disastrous of a launch this game had. While a lot of people criticized the microtransactions, a lot of people couldn't even play the game on PC at launch. The game would crash when there'd be at less than 3 people on screen, which is silly because it's an RPG, and it's known for having multiple characters on screen at the same time because it's open world. Sometimes most of your characters would just disappear from existence right in front of your face. I don't understand why in 2024 it's so hard to ask for a game to run smoothly on day one, especially a game from a company as big as Capcom. But, like I said, I think this game was rushed out on purpose to test out the waters to see how people reacted to their new ideas. Also, I want to mention how lazy the character voices are. Every character sounds like the same 5 people, just with different voice pitches. It's extremely annoying considering how often we have to listen to these characters talk. Everything about this game screams rushed development. This might seem kind of a nitpick, but the inventory system is complete trash. To start with, it is stupidly easy to become over-encumbered in this game. You have all these pawns constantly grabbing shit off the ground, and you're constantly dumping items out of your inventory because of how slow your movement becomes. While we're talking about the pawns, let's talk about how these people never shut the hell up. They are constantly talking about bullshit that doesn't matter. It's so bad that the developers had to add an option to silence the party chatter because it was driving people nuts. Like, I'm not kidding. The chatter has driven me absolutely nuts. I hear these damn pawns in my nightmares. So overall, there's a lot of things that I think need to be addressed. They should at least make a fast travel system more accessible to people because the map is so massive that it sucks not having the ability to fast travel everywhere because the distance between all the waypoints is massive. I also think that they should add a better checkpoint system because if you die and your save point was 25 minutes back in the game, you're gonna have to redo all of that progress. I honestly think Capcom could have done much better with this game because they had just released Resident Evil 4's remake the year before, and we saw how great that game was. It's a shame that most people had to pay $70 for a half-baked and underdeveloped game. This has unfortunately become a common occurrence for many people in this day and age. The worst part about all of this is that recently Capcom has said that if you don't like paying $70 for their games, wait 5 years and you'll find it in a bargain bin for $5, which is kind of a weird thing to say to your loyal fans. It feels like they have very little faith in their games that aren't Resident Evil, because you know damn well that Resident Evil 4 will probably hang on $40 or $60 for the next 6 years. That's all I really wanted to talk about. I recently saw Fighting Cowboy say that this game is in his Game of the Year list, and that really confused me because even though I enjoyed this game a tiny bit, it definitely isn't a game that's worth Game of the Year. And since I've gone back and I've played this game, it made me want to talk about this because this game has so many glaring issues that nobody seems to want to mention whenever the topic of this game comes up. But that's going to do it for me, guys, and have a good night. Also, before I go, I just want to say if you enjoyed this video, please watch another one, because that's how the YouTube algorithm works. If you enjoyed this, it might recommend this video to someone else who likes this kind of content. Again, I want to thank you for the support, and I'll see you in the next one.